From the sick and twisted mind of Mark Cerny, the monster who created Knack, comes the PS5 Pro for $699 US. Okay, so if you aren't aware, this morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, Mark Cerny hosted a brief presentation announcing the PS5 Pro. He showcased its hardware improvements, which included a roughly 45% boost in GPU performance, as well as improved ray tracing and PSSR, PlayStation's neural network-based image upscaling, which I'm fighting against with every fiber of my being not to just call pisser. These features tout improved image detail, sharpness, lighting, and greatly improved frame rates. Okay, now, let me start with some positives. I like how condensed and to the point this presentation is, especially over the original PS5 technical reveal, which I think was over an hour. However, the PS5 Pro reveal was wrapped up in a tidy 9 minutes. Here's the console, here are the specs, here are the improved features, here are the practical applications of these improved features over the base PS5, featuring release games that you're most likely already familiar with. However, at the end of the presentation came the price, $700 US, without a vertical stand and no included disk drive. The disk drive, according to Wario64, is a separate $80 purchase. Absolutely incredible. Okay, so if you've been following my channel, this is for sure way different from my usual content. But I cannot stop thinking about this. I am so curious what the market response is going to be to this console on launch. I mean, this is obviously an enthusiast piece of hardware, but is there enough of a market for this? Especially considering the current economy and current purchasing power of the average gaming consumer in relation to inflation, electronics price hikes, or the like. At this present moment, I don't know if I can see enough of a demand to meet the price of entry for this console. However, I very likely could be entirely wrong here, especially since an industry analyst claims the PS5 Pro will sell at roughly the same rate that the PS4 Pro did. But at least to me, it feels like the market is at such a different place than it was in 2015. So at the moment, I'm really skeptical in terms of it selling as well as the PS4 Pro did during its tenure. So back to the PS5 Pro's pricing. I expected it to be expensive, but not $699 US expensive. $600 maybe, but going with $600 may mean that Sony would be incurring too much of a loss for each console sale. And Sony absolutely does not need to do that right now. Sony is, by a pretty wide margin, in the lead this console generation. I'm not including the Switch here because the Switch is more or less in its own category. This console, the PS5 Pro, isn't necessarily aiming for the same market demographic that the Switch is. This console sales lead is in comparison to Microsoft. So far, the PS5 has sold roughly 61.7 million, while the Xbox Series X and S have only sold around 21 million combined. Because Sony has such a huge lead this generation, I imagine they're in a safe enough spot where they're going to see how much they can feasibly make per unit out of a console release like this. It also absolutely feels like Sony is at the peak of the classic games industry trend, where whatever console manufacturer was in the lead the previous generation, or is in the lead this current generation, gets extraordinarily cocky. This feels like Sony at peak ego. $700 feels, to me, to be an extraordinarily steep asking price, and also really out of touch with their consumer base. Especially if you're someone who owns a large collection of physical PS4 and PS5 games. If you want to have access to your physical library on PS5 Pro, fuck you. That's an additional $80. The additional $80 disk drive requirement feels especially unreasonable to me. However, like I mentioned earlier, this console is clearly meant for a specific category of PlayStation and hardware enthusiast who probably also has a lot of disposable income. However, if you are a PlayStation, hardware, and/or tech enthusiast, I would imagine you probably also have a gaming PC, and a pretty sizable number of PS4 and PS5 exclusives have been ported to PC. And I'm expecting almost every other PS exclusive to eventually make its way to PC as well. Though, to be completely fair, and this is probably a pretty significant factor, for the group of people who are enthusiasts or PlayStation diehards but don't already own a gaming PC, from what I've gathered, the $700 price tag of the PS5 Pro is still currently cheaper than buying a comparable PC build. So, with a cheaper barrier to entry in mind, practically speaking, the PS5 Pro could very well sell just fine to its intended demographics. I also think it is important to keep in mind that I am probably outside of the demographic that would pick up or consider picking up a PS5 Pro. I own a launch PS5 and a pretty beefy PC that is considerably more powerful than a PS5. I was one of the 2.5 people who didn't own a PS4, and therefore, by owning a PS5, I got to play a bunch of exclusives that I missed out on. And for me, it was worth it. A big chunk of those exclusives, however, eventually made their way to PC. I'm additionally one of the increasingly dwindling number of people who likes owning physical media, especially 4K Blu-rays. But aside from that, I really only play exclusives on PS5. Everything else I purchase, I usually play on PC, if not Switch. There have been so few PS5 exclusives over the course of this generation, and even fewer exclusives that I've legitimately had an interest in. Out of a library of over 700 games thus far, I think only around 21 are still PS5 exclusives. And the games they showed in that presentation were all games that I've either already completed or have no interest in. Additionally, in terms of the PS5 Pro's features, the biggest deal, to me personally, would be the touted frame rate upgrades you would get from the combined GPU upgrade and use of PSSR. However, Tom Warren of The Verge mentioned that his sources told him that there will be a number of PS5 Pro enhanced games that are only 30 frames per second. Now, I know this will not be a big deal to a number of people, but I have a 120Hz OLED TV. On a 60Hz TV, which I know a large number of people still have, a single frame of a 30 frame per second game will display twice per second. On a 120Hz TV, however, a 30 frame per second game will display 4 times per second. The human eye, at least my human eye, is going to notice that 4 frame persistence, and so a game is therefore going to appear choppier at 30 frames per second on a 120Hz TV than it would on a 60Hz TV. Regardless of the fact that these TVs with different refresh rates are displaying the exact same frame rate inside of the same second. Having better performance for a handful of games that I've already finished and or have no interest in returning to, as well as being aware of the PS5's paltry number of console exclusives, pretty much kills my interest in a PS5 Pro. The only reason why I might pick one up is for testing and reviewing games on this channel. Aside from that, I'm good. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the PS5 Pro and its pricing? Are you fine with it? Do you hate it? Do you think its features justify its price? Are my criticisms completely insane and unjustified? Does Mark Cerny sound like a godless hybrid of Jason Schwartzman and Ryan Reynolds?
Hi, I'm Mark Cerny. I'm excited to be here to talk about the newest addition to our console lineup.
Sound off in the comments below. A huge, massive, gigantic thank you to Shivering Pixel patrons Mr. Badger and Scotty Scotties. You too can have your name read aloud on every new video upload, as well as receive most videos 1 week early by signing up at the $5 or $10 level at patreon.com/shiveringpixel. Please check it out.